In this video, I'm going to outline the key calendar events that we're going to be focusing on next week. Now, before we do, we're going to just remind ourselves why we look at these high probability calendar events and how we use them to update our cheat sheet so we can know in advance which calendar events are likely to move markets and what we're looking for each time. Although a challenging week, the reason we look at the economic calendar is to find clear opportunities. And at the start of this week, on the Monday, we highlighted it on the cheat sheet that the Euro US dollar buy bias remains in place as there was a shift as the conversation went from should it be 25 or 50 basis point Fed cut to how deep, how far will the cuts be. So that just increased expectations that the Federal Reserve would have a more dovish meeting on Wednesday. Now, obviously, this was before Wednesday, so we had no idea what the Federal Reserve would actually decide. But this was enough just to keep sentiment supporting the Euro US dollar. And we were looking for either dip buyers or just buyers in place trying to pre-position ahead of Powell on Wednesday. Now, in the end, there wasn't really much of an opportunity here. Maybe if you got a dip onto support, but really it was a very mild opportunity and very hard to take advantage of. But this is why we do look at the economic calendar for situations like this where we can see a clear bias into an event. Now, the Federal Reserve interest rate meeting is one of the hardest central bank decisions to trade, and it is very challenging. But nevertheless, that's why we look at the economic calendar, just to find these times in the market where there's a asymmetrical bias and markets are preferring to buy an instrument in one direction, particularly when it's heading into an event like we had with this scenario for the Fed meeting on Wednesday. For this week, there's three key events that are grabbing my attention as we look ahead. The first one is the Reserve Bank of Australia interest rate decision. Short-term interest rate markets currently see 93% chance of a Reserve Bank of Australia hold, and the remaining percentage is seen as a 7% chance for an interest rate cut. Now, what I want to see here from the RBA is how are they feeling about potential interest rate hikes? Inflation has been really sticky in Australia, and the RBA have, given an Aussie New Zealand dollar buy bias out of their last interest rate decision. I want to see how that fares now and how the RBA are viewing the future path of rates. So that's going to be very interesting on Tuesday and could produce an opportunity in the Aussie New Zealand dollar pair. We'll have the cheat sheet updated nearer the time, but that does also flow through into Wednesday's Australian CPI print, because that's going to be very influential for the RBA in terms of their forward guidance. So these two events are very close together, and what I want to see is what chances are the RBA seeing about future interest rate hikes, or have they totally taken those off the table now? So inflation is going to be very important. It's been sticky in Australia, and they're one of the last central banks to start signaling interest rate cuts, and they still, in principle, have interest rate hikes on the table. So are we reaching a pivot point, a turning point? How the RBA feeling, and the CPI print will be influential. So Tuesday and Wednesday, big day for the Aussie dollar. Then on Thursday, we had the SMB rate decision. They are expected to cut interest rates again, and the weakness in the Swiss franc has been sort of pronounced over the last few weeks. So I want to see how the SMB are feeling moving forward into the end of the year. There is likely to be a muted reaction. There's not much that's unexpected out of the SMB on Thursday, but nevertheless, it could give us a decent Euro Swiss franc upside bias if the SMB maintain a more dovish outlook. So Euro Swiss franc could be potentially interesting on Thursday morning. We'll be covering that on the cheat sheet and on a live risk event as well. So do make sure you make time for the Swiss National Bank rate decision. There's not necessarily much expected, but nevertheless, it is worth covering. So they're the three main events that are really mattering for next week, and I hope you have a good week.